So what would really happen if Iran went to war? Or if Israel attacked Iran and there became World War III? And now here in Canada the supply lines were shut down and Canada had to make declarations of war and had to limit the legal persons here in Canada. Some of us may be aware, in America they have FEMA camps, in America they have military law, in America they could have martial law. So what would happen here in Canada if this situation really transpired? I'm not saying it is. My personal belief is that yeah, we are on a pathway to something big. In this video I'm going to try and kill two birds with one stone. I shouldn't really use that expression, but because you're going to see that in the act that I'm about to share with you guys, an operation of law that I've been talking about for many videos, that I've been sharing with my viewers here, and hopefully a lot of you have taken it to heart and taken it to mind and understand that these are your rights and freedoms. But for some of those that are still doubting and don't really believe that there's this operation of law available to us, that there's obligations that Canada must respect on behalf of our human rights and our human beings, well, have fun with this video. This is a federal act. It's called the Emergencies Act. An act to authorize the taking of special temporary measures to ensure safety and security during national emergencies, and to amend other acts in consequence thereof. Whereas the safety and security of the individual, the protection of the values of the body politic, and the preservation of the sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity of the state are fundamental obligations of government. Black Laws, 6th edition. Individual. As a noun, this term denotes a single person, as distinguished from a group or class, and also, very commonly, a private or natural person, as distinguished from a partnership, cooperation, or association. And whereas the fulfillment of those obligations in Canada may be seriously threatened by a national emergency, and in order to ensure safety and security during such an emergency, the Governor and Council should be authorized, subject to the supervision of Parliament, to take special temporary measures that may not be appropriate in normal times. And whereas the Governor and Council, in taking such special temporary measures, would be subject to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Canadian Bill of Rights, and must have regard to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, particularly with respect to those fundamental rights that are not to be limited or abridged even in a national emergency. Now therefore, Her Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the Senate and House of Commons of Canada, enacts as follows. In Canada, when there was wartime, or when there was dangerous times, they used to have an act or regulation that they used to use to limit and restrict the legal persons. It was called the War Measures Act. Since 1985, that act has been repealed. It's no more good here in Canada. They replaced it with something that is called the Emergencies Act. This is a federal regulation. It applies all across Canada. Now, this act, it allows the Parliament and it allows the government to create temporary laws, temporary regulations, and it allows them to restrict the legal person. You understand, when we're in a time of war or a time of emergency, we all understand that nothing operates in the same way. Well, this is the act that they would use in order to restrictive rules upon the legal person during a time of war or a time of national emergency. Now, in the preamble of this act, it states this. Now, the temporary measures or the temporary acts or laws that they would produce through this emergency act against the legal person, these laws and measures are subject to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and, now listen to this, and to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Should be ringing a bell for those who are watched my videos. So the Canadian government, the Canadian Parliament, when there would be an emergency in Canada, they would be allowed to create laws and rules. But these laws and rules would have to be subject to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. So, starting now, we look back to the start of this Emergencies Act. We look to the preamble, the first line that it says. Now watch how it reads. It says, whereas this is safety and security of the individual. Of the individual. That's how it starts, this act, this regulation. They use the word individual. Because when you understand law, individual can include and does include the natural person, i.e. therefore the human being. The human being. So when they're trying to make these temporary laws and rules during a time of crisis, during a time of war or emergency, they're still subject to respect your rights as a human being. And that's why it comes out exactly in their own statute and regulation, where it states, even though we're going to make laws, we're still going to have to subject these laws to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights. Because they can't strip away these rights, because they're under obligation, they're supposed to be. So the operation of law is showing forth here in the Emergency Act. Now the fact that they're stating that they're under obligation here to make sure that they don't disrespect the rights and freedoms granted under this charter is a great function of law to use to prove when you go for federal court that indeed Canada is underneath this obligation, and they do indeed respect it because they use it in their own acts and in their own regulations. There are some people in Canada that are afraid of being put into intermittent camps. They're afraid of being put into FEMA camps, being taken from the government and forced into work camps and such. This is not going to happen here in Canada. If the emergency really does happen here in Canada, if there's war that breaks out, World War III or whatever happens, and there is a real emergency, you're basically going to be left on your own. That's what's going to really happen here in Canada. The government won't be there to support you. The national grocery stores won't be there to support you. During a time like that, you would even need more to understand who you are, and understand how to call on your rights and your freedoms as a human being, and have the government accountable to you as a human being. Because whatever enactments that they're going to use, whatever laws that they are going to use to try and control illegal persons, you're not going to be subject to them. So if they want to take appropriation of your property, like they do during war times, and say, well, this is property that belongs to the state, you only have ownership rights through your legal person, we're appropriating it back to the state and we're going to use it. As a human being, you can stand up and say, no, I'm sorry, I'm not subjected to this, and you're under obligation to respect this. Take me to your commander, take me to the one who sent you here to do this, and let's have a conversation and see. During wartime, during emergencies, these articles are still available for you. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Article 26, which says there's other rights and freedoms available in Canada, which they know, indeed, is an international covenant on civil and political rights. And in that covenant you call on Article 8 and 16 and 17, which gives you the freedom not to have to submit to what's going on, to this war that is coming, that they perhaps have started on purpose. So no, during wartime, and during a time of emergency, whatever's going on in the world, you still have the right to your human rights. And no one should be able to come to your door and knock on it and say the government wants to possess all your silver and gold. I don't have any of that, but if you people happen to have any of that, no one has the right to come and knock on your door and take that from you. And the Emergencies Act gives you those freedoms and those rights. Very clear. So don't worry and don't be troubled if there is tribulation coming here in the land of Canada. Just be prepared and just be ready. That's all. And again, the Emergencies Act, it shows you the operation of law. That Canada does indeed have obligations to the covenants. Those international covenants and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. That's why we find it expressed in these acts.
The International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 8. No one shall be held in slavery. No one shall be held in servitude. No one shall be required to perform forced or compulsory labor. The International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 16. Everyone shall have the right to recognition everywhere, as a person before the law. The International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 17. No one shall be subjected to arbitrary or unlawful interference with his privacy, family, home, or correspondence, nor to unlawful attacks on his honor and reputation. Everyone has the right to protection of law against such interference or attacks.